This week on Let's Talk About Mental Health TV, I'm going to be talking about confronting your worries and fears as part of building greater strength. And I'll be sharing simple ideas for how to do just that. For example, I don't really like speed bumps, but I'm slowly getting over it. And I used to be worried about taking elevators, but then I started taking steps to avoid it. And if one of your fears or worries happens to be dealing with bad puns, then you're in trouble because there's a lot more where that came from. I'll try to find some better jokes, but I make absolutely no guarantees. So before I make it any worse, let's talk. This is Let's Talk About Mental Health TV, a weekly show full of simple ideas for better mental health. I'm your host, Jeremy Godwin, and each week we'll be having some big conversations about mental health. Plus, I'll be sharing lots of ways that you can improve and maintain your overall well-being. So, let's talk about mental health. Because the more we talk about it, the easier it gets. Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Let's Talk About Mental Health TV, the show all about simple ideas for better mental health and well-being. Today I'm coming to you live from the surface of the sun. It's height of summer here in Australia, and even though it's first thing in the morning, it's pretty warm. Today I'm going to be sharing simple ideas for dealing with your worries and fears by consciously building greater mental and emotional strength. And before I jump into today's content, a massive thank you to everybody who watched the first episode of the show last week. And an even bigger thanks to those of you who reached out with some really wonderful feedback. I really appreciate it, and please know that all of your feedback absolutely means the world to me. So speaking of, I had originally planned that this show was going to be about lots of different things in every episode. And I'd originally planned that it was going to be really full of content. And then I realized after doing the first episode just how difficult I was making life for myself. And also, let's be honest, not everybody wants to sit down and watch a 25-minute video. So my goal now is to keep things as simple as possible. A very timely realization, given that this week's episode of the podcast, episode 63, is Let's Talk About Simplicity, out now wherever fine podcasts are found. And my goal is to try to keep these episodes to probably around 10 to 15 minutes. So part of that involves seeing how I go with things, which kind of gives me heart palpitations because I like to be planned and structured and scripted well in advance. But the other part of that as well is about saying, okay, well, my instincts are telling me that this show is probably going to be more effective if I focus on one big topic per episode, rather than trying to be all things to all people. So every now and then I'll include extra stuff that I think is relevant, either during the week or for what's going on in the world or whatever, but I'll be focusing on probably one big topic every single week. I'd love to know what you think about that idea. Let me know in the comments below. So in today's episode, I want to talk about simple ways to tackle your worries and fears in order to build greater mental and emotional strength, which is a massive part of your well-being. The thing is that fear and worry can hold us back from doing things, or it can make us focus way too much on the stuff that's completely out of our control, like what the weather's doing, or what other people think of us, or whether or not our favorite contestant on RuPaul's Drag Race UK got robbed. I spent so long worried about what people would think about when I started doing this show on YouTube that I put it off for ages. And then once I finally hit publish and it released last week, it was like an absolute weight had been lifted from my shoulders. And I guess it's that thing about, you worry about all of these things and you have these fears and insecurities that are quite deep down. But by pushing through them, you actually start to find the strength in order to do what you want to do and achieve what you want to achieve in spite of those fears. And I guess that's what this episode is really all about. And it's funny because I had another episode idea that was planned for this one, and then I actually had a quite recent example of needing to sort of just choose to go with the flow and ease myself through in order to deal with worry and fear and what was a really difficult situation. And I kind of talked about this briefly on the podcast as well, which was that last week I went to Sydney for the day to go see my mother for the first time in a while. She has been moved into a care home. She has dementia and other health issues. And so it was the first time that I was able to actually physically see her in the home where she is because of COVID restrictions. And, you know, in the lead up to that visit, my anxiety and panic attacks just went into overdrive. I was hyperventilating in the morning, you know, and part of that is about the fact that it took a lot of strength for that visit. I have talked about this on the podcast previously about the fact that since the beginning of 2013, I had not spoken to my mother for quite some time. So we were estranged for quite a few years. And then once we reestablished that relationship, it was just weird because I'd missed out on this sort of 7.5 year period of, she had changed a lot in that period. And I guess that's what happens with dementia. And so it's like a weird new relationship. And I guess so all of that stuff, you know, it's one thing talking to somebody by phone or by video call, but when you actually go and see them in person and you see the facility where they're living, it's really confronting. And it was a big thing. And, you know, I know that she doesn't want to be in there, and that's part of the issue as well. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is I didn't just have a little bit of, you know, I've got a big drive ahead of me. And we're talking about a 7-hour round trip by car to get up there. But what I actually had was all of these things happening at once. Seeing my mother for the first time in all this time, going to a facility where she's being looked after, seeing her in person with dementia for the first time, it was a lot to deal with. And so what I found was that it really forced me to just, in the morning at least, to just focus on one small thing at a time and get through that. Like, you know, the next thing I needed to do to get ready, just focus on brushing my teeth. Just focus on, well, I'd say doing my hair, but clearly not. By doing that, it made it much easier to deal with. And so that's actually why I decided I wanted to talk about this topic today, because this really is something that's quite relevant for a lot of us. And there's so much going on in the world at the moment that it felt like a really timely conversation to have about what we need to do to push past our worries and our fears in order to build and maintain our mental strength and our emotional strength. And so that first piece that I just said was around, you know, just focusing on when you're in that situation of being really overwhelmed by things, just focusing on what you need to do, the next step to get through to, rather than trying to think about, you know, the entire day or the entire project or whatever it is that you're working on. The thing about strength is that it's not the absence of fear that makes us strong. It's how we confront our fears and our worries and then make progress in spite of them, no matter how small, so that they no longer have control over us. It's about how we deal with the inevitable challenges that life throws our way, and how you choose to take small steps and small actions every single day to manage your thoughts, feelings, and actions. And so that you do that so that you can continually move forward in life rather than being stuck and unable to move on from difficult feelings and emotions. So when I talk about thoughts, feelings, and actions, that's something I explored back in episode 40, Let's Talk About Strength. And within that episode, I explained it like this. Thoughts are about developing your strength by training yourself to be realistically positive. In other words, challenging negative or unproductive thoughts and replacing them with positive ones that are grounded in realism, which means dealing with things as they are, not as you wish they were. Feelings is about being strong by acknowledging your emotions rather than ignoring or suppressing them, and knowing how to manage them, which is something I discussed in episode 28, Let's Talk About Feelings. And actions. This is about being mentally strong by doing things that are in your best interests, including taking action to make things better, such as seeking support and treatment for any mental health conditions that you may be experiencing, proactively managing your physical and mental health every day, etc. Now, the thing about mental strength, just like physical strength, it doesn't just happen because we want it to. We have to put in the work. And then the other piece there as well is to recognize that having challenges with your mental health is not weakness. Acknowledging it and doing something about it is real strength. So how do you do that? How do you acknowledge things? How do you do things to build greater mental and emotional strength? Well, here are 5 simple ideas that I'd like to share with you today. The first is to choose to focus on realistic positivity. Most of our fears aren't based on anything other than fear. And as Henry David Thoreau wrote in 1851, nothing is so much to be feared as fear. And that's a quote that's believed to have inspired Roosevelt's 1933 inaugural speech. The thing is that if you let fear be what you focus on, then you'll find that you have more and more to be fearful about. But instead, if you focus your energy on being realistically positive, and what that means is knowing that most things tend to turn out for the best, and our worst case scenario thinking rarely turns into reality. But it's also about not being delusional and expecting that everything's always perfect, because life is not like that. The thing is that when you choose to look for the positives and to be optimistic in a realistic way, you find a lot more to be positive about. So my second idea is to take things one step at a time. You can only do so much at a time, and you cannot resolve everything all at once. So instead of biting off more than you can chew, choose to focus on one small step at a time. It's exactly what I was talking about before when I had to go and see my mother for the first time in the home. I found I was able to calm myself by just focusing on that next small thing. Brush my teeth, fill my water bottle, get in the car, put my Eurovision playlist on shuffle so that I could have 3.5 hours of quality music during the drive. When you break things down into smaller chunks, it makes them easier to achieve. And achieving things helps you to feel successful. And when you feel successful, that helps you to achieve more things. And, well, you get the drift. It's a circle of love. Next, be aware of what goes into your body and your mind. What you consume will have a direct effect on your well-being. So if you eat crap or watch crap, then you will feel crap. I mean, let's not oversimplify things here, because just eating well and watching quality programming won't magically resolve any challenges that you might be facing. But when you're consuming in a healthy way, you lay the foundations that you need to be able to more effectively deal with all the other stuff that inevitably comes your way. And that also goes for the type of relationships that you have. Friendships, family, romantic relationships, work relationships, all of it. Unhealthy relationships lead to unhealthy outcomes, whereas healthy relationships will lead to healthy outcomes. For more on healthy relationships, check out episode 38, Let's Talk About Relationships. Simple idea number 4 is to prioritize kindness towards yourself and others. Kindness is strength. And how you treat other people will determine how they treat you, because you get back what you put out into the world. So choose to be kind to others, and you'll see that they are far nicer and much more willing to support you if and when you need it. And the same thing goes for how you treat yourself. Because if you can't love yourself, then how the hell are you going to love somebody else? And simple idea number 5 is that instead of focusing on problems, look for the opportunities that each challenge presents to you. Every single situation in life has something to teach you. It's a learning opportunity if you choose to just look at it that way. You know, instead of getting hung up on the negative, look for what situations can teach you, even the bad ones. You know, I've talked about on the podcast the fact that back in April of 2020, our cat Pushka died. And she was 17. We'd had her since she was an 8-week-old kitten. So it was absolutely devastating. We don't have children, so, you know, she was our fur baby. But what that taught me was, A, that we were so incredibly lucky to have her for that long, because, let's be honest, 17 is a long life for a cat. And B, just how much love we had to give to a pet. And so as a result of processing that loss, we then made a decision that we would adopt a rescue cat a little while back. And so now we have Igor, who is our big baby bear, who bosses us around and gives us lots of love and affection. And so my point here is that even the darkest of times, so the things that you might have fears of or be worried about, even those things can lead to opportunities to grow and to find greater strength if you just let them. And then, because I'm feeling extra generous today, I'm actually going to share a bonus tip, which is be true to yourself. So when it comes to being the very best version of yourself possible, what that really means is living a life that feels truthful and where you just don't have regrets, because regrets are a pointless waste of time. The past has passed and you cannot change it. All you can do is learn from it. So instead of getting hung up on the past and having regrets, instead choose to learn the lessons that you need to learn and then let go. So when you're true to yourself, You feel empowered to be able to make choices that are in your best interest and that help you to get the most out of life. And it also means that you're able to focus much less on the stuff that really just does not matter in the big scheme of things. Life is too valuable to spend it worrying about what other people think or doing things that make you feel unhappy. So make the choice to know yourself and be true to yourself, and you'll find that your mental and emotional strength will grow stronger and stronger every single day as a result. So I want to take a moment to share a recent quote from the British author Matt Haig, who shared this on his Instagram. And I quite liked the quote, and I think it's a good way of looking at anxiety as well as things like worry and fear, which are hallmarks of anxiety. And so the quote is, "Recently, I see my anxiety less like an illness and more like an injury that flares up when I don't look after myself. It reminds me of the need to do the right kind of rest." And so even though that point might seem really specific around anxiety, worry and fear are closely related to anxiety, and they're common symptoms as well. And so it's a good reminder that we need to be practicing self-care daily by being kind and gentle with ourselves. So do you want to explore the topic of strength and mental health some more? Check out episode 40 of the Let's Talk About Mental Health podcast, Let's Talk About Strength. You may also find episode 10, Let's Talk About Fear, to be helpful. So that's nearly it for this week. Let me know down in the comments what stuff worked well for you in this week and what you're going to be trying out over the next few days. I'd love to hear from you. And if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with somebody that you know as well so that they can join us talking about mental health. So in next week's show, I'm going to be looking at social media and mental health, and I'm going to be sharing some simple ideas for how to manage your social media use for the sake of your well-being. That episode will be released on Wednesday, the 3rd of February, and I hope you'll join me again next time. Find more content at letstalkaboutmentalhealth.com.au and follow Let's Talk About Mental Health on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at LTA Mental Health, where I post extra content related to this show and the podcast. You can also follow my own account at Jeremy Godwin Official, where I post stuff about my work as a writer and share stuff that I find interesting and amusing. And of course, take a moment to subscribe to the Let's Talk About Mental Health YouTube channel. So I'm about to go find some air conditioning because it's about 3,000 degrees in this room. Thanks so much for joining me this week, and I hope to see you again next week. Look after yourself and make a conscious effort to share positivity and kindness out into the world, because you get back what you put out. Take care and talk to you next time.